We do have a quorum, so I'll call the meeting to order. And the first order of business will be approval of the minutes. Is there a motion?
So okay. I had two observations, and it's just a little more detail for the minutes, and obviously it's in the video record, but there's an observation on the first page of the minutes at the bottom in section 4B about how we had 61 applicants for entry level and 7 for lateral. And we had some discussion around what prior year and prior opening application levels were. And I guess I'd propose to amend the minutes to include some language around what those prior years were. I think the reflection of significantly lower applicants for these positions is directly affected by the policies and the rhetoric that comes from policymakers across the board. So I think it's helpful to reflect it in that section 4B. And then I think that is the only suggestion I had to the minutes.
Okay. Anyone else have any suggestions? Is there unanimous consent to make that amendment to the minutes? Okay. Yes. I'm seeing everyone's in approval. So anything else? So with the amended changes, is there a motion to approve minutes as amended?
I move to approve the
minutes. Okay, Rosa does, and there's a second. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of approval of the minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, takes care of minutes. Are there anybody from the public who asked to appear on non-agenda items? Okay, well, thank you. And then Joe, you're right on time. Welcome. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Report, we're right on number 4, report from the fire department.
Sir, can you bring that up to the screen? Thank you. Is my audio better with this microphone? I'm hoping. Yeah, because it goes through my computer, so I selected a different mic. I just wanted to make sure. All right, so a couple of things to bring up. Call volume is what it is from a response standpoint. We're seeing trends that are similar. We were down a little bit last year. That was predictable with COVID. So the thing that was shared with our membership, because of the fact that there was concern about how busy the department was and how it's reflected in call volume. So one of the things that I tried to get across is the fact that the work really did not go down. The amount of work that had to happen, there's certain precautions that had to be put in place last year that we never had to do before. So there's a lot of stuff that we had to do in addition to the work that we would typically do. And the other thing, and I think I shared this with you before, if we are truly doing our jobs from a fire prevention standpoint, which does require more time and effort, it should actually reflect in a negative trend in our call volume. So that's one issue that the fire service is grappling with right now is how we're able to quantify work if prevention is intended to reduce call volume, because call volume doesn't necessarily address the overall work effort that's going into the department. On the second page, what we're able to reflect is the existing staffing numbers. You will be in closed session today hearing from me about the 3 firefighters that are going to be removed from probationary status. We also have a firefighter that is transitioning from our paid on premise, our paid on call element to the support staff. And I'll share some of the things that she's been working on. We are in the process of hiring some part-time or I should say paid on call, paid on premise firefighters. And we anticipate starting their training mid-April. We are still waiting on one firefighter's complete background. So more on that to follow at the next meeting. We'll be able to place that on the agenda. And then we received 2 resignation letters, one of which was from a firefighter that moved out of the area. He was still actively involved with our department, but has recently been employed by I forget who it is. I think it's USDA as a food inspector. And then we had another firefighter that never was able to start his minimum skills training because he got activated with the guard and was never able to commit. He is still very much interested in maybe coming back someday, but we won't be able to use him until he goes through the process again. So that's somebody who has placed his resignation, understanding that he just couldn't commit the time at this point. As far as other items on the agenda, I just lost my screen. So Sarah, can you help me out with the agenda? I'll try to get my screen back.
Yeah, so Joe, you're done with the staffing report?
Yeah, the staffing report is finished. There is one other thing that I'll be bringing to you in April. We do have a member that was on military leave, and he has expressed interest in coming back. He shared that with me over the weekend, and so I've asked him to send me an email in regards to whether he can commit again or not. And then before we take him off of military leave, I'll bring that before you, and that'll be in April.
Thanks, Joe. The next item is kind of a joint item by Joe, myself, Sarah, and all of us. And that's the discussion regarding the paid on-call fire science intern recruitments, past and future actions. As a little background, after our meeting last month, and we were discussing about the backgrounds or whatnot on the paid on-call, I was kind of racking my brain because you know how there's time frame differences as to what the approval process was for all of that. And I looked at our agenda, and it had never come to us before, or for what the process was, and for the Police and Fire Commission approval. So I talked to Sarah, and we went back several months, and so what it really amounted to is it missed following what our approved rules are. And Joe and I had a number of email exchanges back and forth to try to figure this out. And we had a meeting with the mayor, and essentially it was never this is what had always happened with paid on call. It hadn't gone through for our approval, at least as far as we could find. And so Joe had written up some of the documents which you saw, which was a process to kind of quantify exactly what they do. When we met with the mayor, I started to go through it afterwards and contacted Sarah because it was like it needed to be, from my perspective, it needed to be marked up quite a bit to fit with our rules. And Sarah Sarah came back with that she, why have 2 separate rules? Why not just follow the the process that we laid out with our rules for both police and fire? And if and I think what Joe may have here is something that might be helpful guidance for the fire department, but not to set up 2 separate processes.
I can explain it as soon as, if anybody has any questions, I'll pause, but I can explain the intent.
Okay, go ahead, Joe.
Okay, so one of the things that I acknowledge is the importance of bringing any hiring process before the Police and Fire Commission. Prior to our rules update this last year, going off of the rules and regulations dated 2008, we had typically just identified the fact that we had a process that was in place that ran annually. So there were some assumptions on my part moving it forward. Some of the processes were worked directly with members of my staff and members of Sarah's staff. So although Sarah and I were involved indirectly, that was done independent of anything that appeared on the Police and Fire Commission until it was time for approval of the candidate. There has never been a candidate that has been approved that has not come through the Police and Fire Commission. The process however, was never completely vetted with every single candidate or every single process. So now that we have the new rules that were updated this last year, the process is more specific. In order to address the internal need for direction, the policy that I have before you right now gives our membership and those responsible for the different hiring practices an idea of when we need to get certain things submitted to the Police and Fire Commission so that we can approve those processes in advance of inviting people in for interview. In addition to that, each nuance of our department has a little bit different take. So from a paid on call standpoint, to a fire service intern, to a career firefighter, there's different things that we really have to consider from an internal process as far as what we're going to be bringing on board, how we're going to post that, and what we need to do to work with HR. And the lead time that's required as a result of getting things in advance of the Police and Fire Commission, so it can be posted and it is available for open meetings and open records. So the intent behind my policy is not to take away from the Police and Fire Commission's rules. It actually works in conjunction with the Police and Fire's rules. And it also takes into consideration what needs to happen through HR. If there's one thing that I hope that I can instill in this process is the fact that it is a transparent process and it involves more than just me, my staff, and our organizational bias. So Sarah, if you page down to, I think the final page, might be page 4, I think, 3, that one right there. So if we go down there, it also gives an idea of what we're looking for when we establish an interview panel. So the intent is to make sure that we make sure that we have a panel that represents the community that we serve. It will be made up of internal panelists, that being members of our department, and external panelists, those that are members of the community. They should represent a good portion of our population wherever possible, and we need to take into consideration the gender perspective of establishing a well-rounded panel. The questions, the reason why I wanted to put this in there is so that when we draft questions, we don't automatically assume that those questions are going to be used without vetting that through HR. The intent with it vetting through HR is to make sure that it's worded appropriately, that we take into consideration some of the things that might be considered trigger words or words that don't necessarily, words that detract from the process. So having that done, and then before we bring that forward to the Police and Fire Commission, hopefully you'll be reassured to know that it's not just the fire department writing these questions in a way that identifies what's best for those in our department. We're really trying to figure out how we can solicit interest from those outside of our department, and that's going to be rooted in trust and outreach. So that's sort of the intent behind that. The transparency element identifies the fact that our Police and Fire Commission is the community oversight that we have in our community. And the reason why that's important to list is because of the fact that obviously from a number of different municipalities and the sizes of municipalities, you can probably predict that there is a variety of different levels of oversight, and the more levels that we have in there, the longer that process is going to be. So this gives us an idea of where that community oversight is and how we can instill transparency.
Sarah?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, this policy, it's stated in our PFC rules, we talk about balanced panels, having objective questions. So, I see if this is something you want to use internally, Joe, but I do think that everything you've addressed in this policy is definitely, listed in the PFC rules and regs. And so, I understand that, we'll always bring authorizations to start these recruitments to the PFC going forward, but that wasn't the history. We were only bringing candidates to hire to PFC for POCs and interns, but not the authorization to actually start the recruitment. But we have some safeguards in place before my HR specialist can post a POC or intern. She has to actually check off that the PFC has approved it. That communication wasn't happening. So she would get an email from someone in the fire department that would say, hey, post POCs, and she would post POCs. So we had that disconnect.
So some of this was happening independent of me and of Sarah. And so what we have done internally within our respective departments is to address those things that didn't necessarily happen as they had happened in the past. And I don't think there was any intent on circumventing the rules. I think this was just autopilot where these things happen year after year. And so it got to that point of the year, and the two entities worked together to make sure that we could address our recruitment needs.
Okay. Any commissioners have questions or other follow-up? Tom?
So I have, and thank you both, well, everyone, for kind of bringing this to our attention, because it does make sense and is something to take a look at. The policy is very well written. I appreciate that. One note, and it's not any kind of legal advice or legal comment, is that in the accountability section on page 1, there's reference to the idea that policies and procedures have a legal, ethical, operational, contractual, and safety reasons. I would not say this is contractual at all, to the extent that this moves forward. I don't think you want to create a policy or create a contract through a policy. So that's just one general observation. The other one is, I do see in our rules and regulations as a commission, where we've got in section 2.2 a more general statement of everything that I think is encompassed in this policy. So I like the timeline aspect of this, and I think that's important. And certainly, Chief, to the extent that's beneficial for you internally, I think that's great. The language on page 3, I guess I would maybe suggest we eliminate, because I think that's a discussion that can occur whenever the need arises at the PFC in accordance with the rules and regulations as we currently have them. And like Sarah said, the interview questions, the bias observations and education, the function of the questions, I think are addressed in a general manner within our rules and regulation, and they can be addressed specifically when the need arises.
So what I may do there, because the whole intent of having that in the document is just so that as we prepare our process, they have a place to go. I think what I'll do in that situation is just list the chapter and verse of the PFC rules and regs, just so that they know that we still need to look at those things. So when we're considering what has to happen from a hiring process, all of the elements all of the I's that have to be dotted and T's that have to be crossed.
Anyone else? I guess one other follow-up, from the standpoint of when I initially saw this draft, I had kind of marked it all up. And that's where I think Sarah had said, well, why have two separate? I think it would work as a guidance document for Joe and his staff, so to making sure that they're bringing everything to us that they should. And that's kind of my kind of gut reaction.
And if I may, the SOP was never written for the Police and Fire Commission to follow. I'm not setting rules and regulations for the PFC. That is something that obviously you have done as a commission and went through great strides to make sure that you have updated this last year. This was intended to be an internal document for my staff so that they have something to work off of that is consistent with our template, our standard operating guideline, standardized policy and procedure manual, and it will be placed in our electronic policy and procedure manual. What I'm trying to do is create not so much a one-stop shop, but as close as I can. Because if I have too many variations as far as where this information can be found, it'll be more difficult to find it when we actually need it. So instead of maybe listing things separately, I can identify where that information can be found, but to start the process, they know where to look to get things started.
So next steps would be, I think, to make sure all the commissioners, have more of the background, and to kind of weigh in as to what needs to change in this. If it's an internal document for fire department, we're not changing our rules, but to make sure that we got to make sure that anything that Joe has for his is consistent with our rules. And I'm only have to expand my screen here because I'm.
So if I may ask a question, then the rules and regulations that are set for the department, do you really want me to bring those by you as long as they reflect what we said they were going to reflect?
Well, let me have the other commissioners weigh in and Sarah weigh in, and I'll comment. Anyone? Jeff?
Yeah, I guess I would just say that I thank you for bringing this up, and I think that it's good just to have this conversation, and I appreciate the fact that you're going through the trouble to do this. And I think that it's a good. It seems like the intent is this is an internal document. In the bylaws for us, anyways, it seems like we have passed on some of that responsibility to you guys as far as the internal process, and that's what this document is. And that's both for the department chief and for the HR group, right? So that's sort of in that first statement in that area. And given that, as long as these are what you're doing is operationally and consistent, and we have the chance to review it at every time when you do open one of these. I don't know that we need to put a fine tooth comb to this, other than knowing that it's out there. I would also just add that I think that we could add this potentially to our introduction packet for all of the new PFC members, because then they would know that this exists and they could review it, and they could review that in conjunction with our bylaws. So.
Anyone? Okay, Tom.
And I agree absolutely with that, Jeff. And to the extent that there is a full standard operating policy or procedure within either or both of the departments, it might be something of interest for the orientation packet for members generally. I think all of this goes to, and I think it's something we've touched on here and there over the course of the last year that I've been a member of the commission, is what are the proper functions of the commission? How much into the detail day to day does the commission get, and where is that line? And I think it can't hurt anyone for us to see the standard internal operating procedures. You may not have any authority or, responsibility for them, but I think it's beneficial to see them. So I like that idea, Jeff.
And another thing that I would like to reinforce that Jeff brought up was the fact that this comes back to every time we have a process. And what this helps with is to make sure that we're hitting all of those points. So it's not like you're approving this and it's a one and done. Every time we have a hiring process, this gives us the ability to speak to every one of those points and when they're intended to happen.
We'll see your box lit up for a second. I didn't know if you were wanting to comment. Okay. Anyone else? I think one of the keys will be that, and I see where this is a major role for HR, that anything that they have internal document is, basically consistent with the PFC policy, and that anything that needs to come to the PFC, is followed, and it'll be important to rectify if there's an inconsistency. So, anyone else? Okay, well, this was a discussion item. The next item was the authorization to bring a fire science intern recruitment.
Yep. So we had been involved in a recruitment process for the fire service intern candidates. These are seniors in high school, so trying to get in front of them to see who might be interested. We have been working with Madison College to identify capable, competent, and qualified candidates. So that's sort of been happening passively without approval of the PFC, but I think that's another thing that we should probably talk about is does recruitment qualify for anything that would require approval? And reaching out and trying to shake hands and that stuff is a very passive process and really should be done consistently throughout the year. So I'm hoping that doesn't necessarily count as part of the process, other than the fact that we know that it has to happen. What we did, and this is, once again, this is something that we have identified as things that will happen differently in the future. This was another process that was posted for the month of February. We tried to do that so that we could get in front of other fire departments that had posted for their intern candidates. This too is a process that was sort of on autopilot, and we had been doing year after year since about 1975. So we are approaching this different next time, and will be identified and has been identified in the standard operating policies, so that in December or January we will be in front of the Police and Fire Commission addressing the posting of the positions, the process that we are going to follow, and a brief timeline. Having not done that, and now having a list of candidates that have placed their application, we have a number that need to come in for the interview. Initially, that interview was scheduled for earlier in the year, and given the sensitivity of the process and making sure that we are disclosing what we are working on, we moved those interviews to this weekend after the Police and Fire Commission meeting. After they meet the panel, we rank them based on the panelists' marks. I can tell you that we do have a diverse panel group. I think we have about 5 people, 2 of which are external panelists, and once that panel rates the candidates, we have an idea of who our top candidates are going to be. And then what we do is we schedule a ride along, a tour, and they meet with me. What I try to do is I try to meet with everybody or give them the opportunity to meet, because these are high school seniors. And if they didn't do well on the interview, I want to give them an idea of what they can do better or how they can position themselves better as they proceed in the fire service. I don't want their first experience with an interview to steer the rest of their career. Not everybody can be an intern, but that shouldn't prevent them from moving forward. So I take advantage of that opportunity when I meet with them to establish what their vision is and what they're doing to best prepare themselves. Taking advantage of the opportunity, maybe even once they graduate high school, to look for their participation on a paid on-premise level. There's a certain amount of recruiting that's intended to happen when I meet with them, regardless of whether they're a top candidate or not. I also encourage them to ride along just so that they get an idea of what it's like. We won't necessarily do scheduled ride-alongs for everybody given the COVID procedures right now, but those that are our top candidates, we will. And that extends their interview. When we do the panelist interview, we have them at most for 30 minutes. When they do a ride-along, we have them for at least 10 hours. It gives us a better idea to be able to give us an idea of what their personality is like. They have 10 hours to ask questions to make sure that the decision that they're making is right for what they want to do. And it also sets them up for success. So it extends the interview considerably and allows us to provide a better impression and gives them a better impression of the organization that they're associating with. So when we do ultimately provide the offer to the department, they are making an educated decision as far as what they want to do. When they're committing to a 2-year agreement. And so we want to make sure that they're making the right choice for themselves, and we are making the right selection as far as the candidate goes. The following step would be at the next PFC meeting, which would be the recommendations for hire. Following that, the contingent offers are made, the backgrounds are initiated, and then the first week in June is when they start.
Anyone have questions on that? The one thing that's noted is missing steps 8 and 9, and I think one might be at the May meeting of final approval. That they cleared the backgrounds.
That was just a typo on my part. That should be step 8 for start first Sunday in June. My apologies.
No, actually, we expect them to be better than that. We want them to skip those 2 steps because they're probably accelerated learners.
But I do think probably at the May meeting you need to say the final approval.
Well, hopefully what we've got, and this is something that we'll have to talk about, if we have approval for contingent offers, if there is nothing that comes up in their background, I would move to move forward with their placement. If something comes up in their background, we will bring that forward to you, much like what we're doing with the paid on call candidates this time around, where we have one candidate that requires an additional portion of the background, and that's coming to you in April. But the rest, we're able to go through that process without incident.
I do think you need to bring the final approvals to the commission, that they cleared their backgrounds. And just giving you
Unless what I do is the recommendation that I ask for in the closed session, and then ultimately what's repeated by the commissioner is contingent of their background investigation. If there are no issues, we can extend the offer.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that that's consistent, I think, with what we do with the police department, and we can certainly revisit that as a commission if we want to handle that differently. But I think it's that what Joe's describing is consistent with what we do with the police department.
The other thing that we're trying to take into consideration is this is already a 2-month process. If we add another month, unless we have a special meeting, we may lose out on candidates that are being sought out by other departments. And that will be especially important with law enforcement.
I think one of the things will be key is, and this is a commission and HR and the chief's issue is what necessarily may cut somebody out on a background.
I think the main thing that you want to know is that if something comes up in the background, that you have an opportunity to see that, and whether it's something that we proceed with, whether we rescind the offer, or whether we continue with the offer. If there is nothing that comes up with the background, my thought is that you've already approved them conditionally, and that condition was met. And so we should be able to proceed.
I do think that that's an interesting point, because I don't think we've really sort of gotten down to the minutia of when we want to see those back. And your point is well taken. If there's nothing comes back in the background, then what's the point of having a conversation, right? But if there is something that comes back in the background, I think that the commission would probably be interested in, being involved in that conversation, both for the police and the fire department.
And I don't disagree with that.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, is there, I think we actually want to get an approval for this recruitment.
I am requesting approval. Yes, sir.
Right. Somebody want to make that motion?
I motion to initiate the recruitment.
Okay, as outlined.
I'll second.
As outlined.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, I think the next item is the closed session. Does somebody want to read the statute?
I can.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Yep, pursuant to section 19.851C, Wisconsin Stats, the commission will move into closed session for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. More specifically, to remove the probationary status of 1 paid on-call firefighter and 2 career firefighters, the reclassification of 1 paid on-call firefighter, and notice of 2 resignations.
There's a motion. Is there a second to go into closed session?
Second.
Okay, Rosa seconds. Okay, all those in favor of going into closed session signify by saying aye, and raise your hand.
Aye.
Got it. Aye. Thank you. Okay. Okay, welcome, return to open session. There may be items to take that were in closed session. Let's take those up. Rosa?
I do have a motion. I move to accept the recommendation of the fire chief to remove the probationary status of firefighters Dan Sparby, Scott Westfall, and Jesus Villagomez.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, and Jim seconds. Any discussion?
Just that Rosa said that much better than I did.
The last one, I know.
Okay, all in favor of removal of the probationary status for three, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Next is the report from the police department. Chief?
Good afternoon again, everybody, and happy St. Patrick's Day. The first item on our agenda, as you mentioned, Mr. Thorson, is our monthly report. I'm just scrolling down to it here, although here comes Sarah with it. So she's going to bail me out as I wade through the agenda. I was about 2 pages away from my scroll, so thank you. Anyway, you can see on the report here that we currently have 2 vacancies. one of which you were notified of a resignation last month, and we had a second resignation that you'll be notified of this month. We have one officer in field training, 0 currently at the Law Enforcement Academy, and 2 officers remain on leave, extended leave, or restricted duty. And that leaves us with a total of 5 patrol positions that currently do not have anyone filling them, and 2 vacancies, as I've mentioned. And then, of course, our demographics have been updated to reflect the current situation. And I will also note for the commission, in the retirement age eligible section, we do have one of the 6 department members listed in 2021 who will be retiring on May 4th. That's Officer Gary Eisenzimmer is going to be retiring after at least 2 decades of service to the city. I don't have his exact years of service, but it's actually probably closer to 25 would be my guess. So we'll get more information to the commission next month for you on that. Any questions about the staffing report at this point?
Go ahead.
Shall we move on to the next agenda item?
Yes.
Excellent. Sarah, you want to do the police officer hiring update?
You bet. So we had interviews today and we have them tomorrow as well. So we had a total of 89 applicants. Of those 89, 7 of them applied for the lateral opening. Of the 89, 14 of them identified as a woman, and 26 identified as a person of color. So we invited about 49 that passed through the supplemental question review process. And unfortunately, only about 30 actually scheduled an interview. We had 2 no-call, no-shows today, and a number of different openings in the schedule. So we're hopeful that these 30 will work out for our chief interviews next week. We have chief interviews on the 25th. We typically bring anywhere from 5 to 10 people in for chief interviews. So that's just a quick little snapshot of the numbers and the process up to today.
So our intent obviously is after chief's interviews next week to evaluate where we're at. We'll begin to assign out background investigations at that point in time. So we'll have a pretty good idea where backgrounds are going to be falling by the time the commission meets in April. So we'll be able to obviously give an update to the commission at that point in time and look to extend conditional offers as well at that point in time. And then we can begin to move into those psychological, drug screen, physical assessment, and those sorts of things.
Thank you. Any questions on the recruitment? If not, the town of Madison recruitment process?
Sure. You wanna start with that one again, Sarah, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to. If you look at the packet, I'm going to share my screen again. We put together a timeline for you on the town of Madison hiring process. So basically, we're kind of going with Madison a little bit with the fact that we're going to use their questions. We're going to be shortening our interviews from 20 minutes to 15 minutes, still allowing for people to view those questions ahead of time. It will be Fitchburg, Madison, and then community members, one from Fitchburg, one from Madison. So we want to have a good balanced panel. And basically, this is a posting that will hopefully, pending your approval, will post on March 22nd, so next week already. Again, only open to current town of Madison officers. And then we anticipate closing April 12th, and then we'll still go through the supplemental question review process, still hold, of course, the panel interviews, the chief interviews. So it's just like our police officer process that we do now, except we're doing this with the city of Madison in kind of a joint hiring process. Following the interviews, we will be looking to make offers or bringing these recommendations for hires to the June 16th PFC. And, potentially we may have 3 that we bring on. There's some town of Madison that want specifically Fitchburg, some that specifically want Madison, and some that don't mind either way. So it'll be interesting to see how the process goes.
How many are you interviewing?
Well, we're not sure yet. So once we post it, then we'll have a better idea of how many. But Chief, I think, is there about 10 or so that are eligible or who are looking to continue employment?
Yeah, I think that's a approximate number. We do have some communication from the town of Madison as far as, which of their staff members are interested in one department versus the other versus those that are interested in either. So it is right around 10 that are anticipated to be interested in one or both departments. So we'll see what we have in that pool of 10, and hopefully we'll have some good candidates there. I think somebody may have asked how many we might anticipate hiring. That's a little bit unknown at this point. Not a little bit, a lot unknown, because it's going to be dependent upon what the city council decides to approve for additional positions as a result of the absorption of the town of Madison. So at this point in time, we've requested, or at least advised the city for planning purposes, that we intend to request 3 sworn positions for the town of Madison absorption. And of course, that is subject to council approval of that request as we begin to work our way through the 2022 budget process. I know it's not necessarily this commission's purview, but from an informational perspective, there was a presentation at the January Committee of the Whole for the council that mostly covered the town of Madison and at least the planning process for that. And at this point in time, at least the city is planning on adding those 3 sworn positions in January of 2022. So that hopefully will continue on that path. But again, obviously that is a council decision to make, and it's at their discretion.
Tom, you got a question?
Chief, if I recall, I'm looking back at our minutes from last month, the standard ratio of officers to residents is 1.8 officers per 1,000 residents, correct?
Well, that's been typically what we've striven or strived for. My English use of tense isn't very good there, but that's typically what we have attempted to achieve. We're not currently there. I think we're trending closer to 1.7 of late, largely based upon the significant population growth that Fitchburg has seen. We're asking for 3 positions for the town, which the section we're getting is about estimated to be about 1,500 residents. So, we'll be at about 2.0 on a population to office ratio but that's still not going to get us anywhere near the 1.8 that we've historically tried to staff at over the years. I don't have the math in front of me, but when you look at 1.7 versus 1.8, oddly enough, it's usually 2 or 3 positions get that much of a movement. So, we'll see where the math lines up as we get a little deeper into things.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions on the town process at all? If there isn't, I would make a request for the commission to authorize our ability to proceed with this joint hiring process with the city of Madison, specifically for town of Madison police officers.
Someone want to make that motion?
I move that we go forward with the hiring process.
Okay, that's with the joint city of Madison. Second. Wait, second.
I can second. Tom, I'm having trouble hearing you, but I can second.
Oh, okay. All those in any discussion? Town of Madison? All those in favor of using the joint interview session with the city of Madison signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next is the closed session. Somebody want to read the statute and make a motion, please?
Okay, I'll read it. Oh, no, I can't read it.
Okay, somebody else.
I'll read it. Sure, I'll do another one. Pursuant to section 19.851C, Wisconsin Stats, the commission will move in into closed session for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. More specifically, to notice the commission on a resignation.
Okay, that is there a motion to go into closed session? And second, all those in favor going to closed session signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. We're in closed session. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And thank you for that update, Chief. Next item is actually any announcements. Does anyone have any announcements?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Rosa.
There were two things that were left from last meeting. The Briar Patch, I wrote it down here. Partnership with the fire department, and there was something regarding the orientation binder. Did we discuss that at all or no?
I think we're good on the orientation binder, but you're right on Briar Patch. So Joe, you were gonna update the PFC, but we ran out of time.
Yep, it's what I haven't for announcements. I just want to make sure that none of the commissioners had anything. So we are working on I guess it's a partnership, an agreement with Briar Patch. Briar Patch will eventually be within the city of Fitchburg off of Rimrock Road. And there's a number of kids that that use those services that are looking for direction and need some life experiences and are looking for ways to improve their overall prospect for work, for school. There's just a number of programs, anything from kids that are homeless or runaways to kids that require a little bit more supervision. We've been working with them recently. We have one kid that has been working with us, who we pair up with a firefighter who's able to provide mentorship, and then ultimately, hopefully, keep that kid out of trouble and make him allow us to help him concentrate on his strengths versus the things that might prevent him from seeking employment in the future. And it's worked pretty well. We're happy to announce that this might be something that we do beyond the fire department in the city. There may be other options, from seasonal work to other things that may be of value, not just to public safety, but to the city in general. And we're just sort of got our feelers out there right now, but it does play into the recruitment. If you recall, in my research, Briar Patch actually came up as an option for recruitment, and to be able to discuss certain things with kids who maybe didn't consider public safety as an option. So the good news behind the Briar Patch commitment is the fact that they provide workers' comp. They provide, and depending on how deep we get into this, they provide the first 12 weeks of salary for the kid. So usually it's an adolescent, usually it's somebody in high school, that person is being paid to help us out. So we've got him doing odd jobs around the fire department with his mentor, and it allows some positive interaction with public safety, whereas we might not necessarily have that interaction by ourselves. So it's facilitated through Briar Patch, and we're looking to see what other types of partnerships we might be able to find similarly through other youth groups in the area. Briar Patch is just one of them.
That's a great update. Thank you. Any other announcements, Chief?
Yeah, I just wanted to inform the commission that the police department has begun to update its policy and procedure manual. Last fall, we had requested approval from the city council to use an outside vendor to assist with this process. And as part of the process, we're going to be updating about 150 policies over the course of this year. And we are providing an opportunity for community feedback on our policies. We just sent out a media release this afternoon that outlines where to find those policies and how to offer feedback. And we'll likely to be releasing approximately 5 policies or so every week as we move through the remainder of the year. We'll leave those policies up on our website for approximately 3 weeks to allow for anybody to review those draft policies and offer any feedback on that. You can go on the city's website and actually sign up to receive an email when new policies have been posted, so that you don't always have to check the site for those policies as well. And if anybody has any thoughts on any additional methods in which we could potentially seek feedback, by all means, feel free to contact me. But obviously, this is hopefully the method that allows us to keep things moving relatively efficiently, because again, we have the goal of getting this entire process done this calendar year.
I would ask, it just triggered, do you have the policy setup team? In other words, you've got a combination of field officers, command staff, and so I'm just kind of curious as to how, when you develop the ones, I know you're revising these, but how they were developed.
Yeah, so we have we've established a work group within the police department that has 6 members, a couple command staff members, a couple sergeants, and a couple of officers who are wading their way through this manual. We went with an outside vendor because they are obviously, this is their business. They've got 150 or so clients in Wisconsin and several thousand across the nation. And they tailor their product to each state that they're doing business in. So their policies all reflect best practices in the law enforcement profession or policing profession. They also contain any required state legislation and or federal legislation within those policies. And it also gives us this online platform in order to be able to access them for our staff. Obviously, shows any changes that were made, indicates that an officer has reviewed the policy and signed off on it. And then ultimately, when we go live with the system in its entirety, they'll provide what they call as daily training bulletins for our staff to review that will give them additional opportunities to review specific policies. So, and then we're doing this obviously with the hopes of getting our manual published online so that it would obviously be available 24/7 to whomever would like it. And this is also being done with an eye towards seeking Wisconsin accreditation as well. So all the policies are being written with that in mind. And it is my intent that once we complete this policy update, ideally by the end of the year, that will then begin to identify when it makes sense to begin the accreditation process, whether that will be already in 22 or if we'll have to, maybe wait a bit of time to 23 to get that started. But that's the process of where we're headed with it, is to seek accreditation for the Fitchburg PD.
Well, the open public process for comment as well as the accreditation are, kudos for moving forward with those. So thank you. I think with that, I think we're all set to adjourn and have a good evening, hopefully.
I have a couple more. I apologize. Okay. Chad got in there before I finished, and I like to talk. A couple of things that I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of, because we're going to be talking about the military leave of absence at our next meeting. To give you an idea of what that all entails, typically our members that leave us for the military service, I encourage them to submit a military leave of absence instead of a resignation. I do that for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is because then when they out process with an honorable discharge, I'm trying to get them engaged in the fire department again as soon as possible, so that we don't have idle minds, and we can hopefully encourage them to continue on a path of employment after the military. There should be some value in honoring the service of our veterans, and as long as they're being released on an honorable discharge, which we will be able to verify through their DD-214 and a background check to be able to reinstate them. They would still have to do their minimum skills, but they really truly haven't resigned from the fire department, which would encourage them to have to go through the hiring process. But I can discuss that. I wanted to give you some lead time on that, so I'm not giving you all of this information all at once in the case that you have questions at the next meeting. There's another thing that we're doing in the fire department right now. I'm trying to establish expectations for all positions, and that's a 360-degree rater system. So they obviously get my expectations, but then expectations from the firefighters up to include what they expect of their supervisors and the command staff. That allows me to do a couple of different things. Not only do I have the ability to address the fire department in the way that they want to be addressed, but additionally, for those seeking progressive levels of leadership, I can have that available so that they know what's expected of them at those levels. So they're making an educated decision as to whether they want to proceed as a supervisor or a member of the command staff. Another reminder that this is going to be our 2021 is the fire department's 50th anniversary. We have one of our support team members who is finishing up the chronicles of the department to give you an idea of where we've come in those 50 years. And then lastly, and this is just for information, we are going to be working directly with the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, and the IAFC, the International Association of Fire Chiefs, to develop best practices for administrative level firefighters in doing what is ultimately considered to be the preferred method for city administration and finance officers. So we're pretty excited about that, because not only does that help us out locally from how we set up our firefighters and our officers for succession, but it's also something that's going to be shared nationally. So pretty happy to be part about part of something that is going to have a much broader outreach. And I think that's all I'm going to say right now, because it's getting dark.
And I just saw Sarah posted to everyone email alert link. So thanks again, everyone. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Okay, Rosa, second. Todd, seconds. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay, everyone have a safe night, and look forward to seeing everyone next month, and stay safe.